So we want to thank all of our speakers, really an excellent job and a difficult topic, I think. And we know that out there are many questions that you have, and you can certainly use them on your smartphone to get in and actually ask the questions for this session, and we will have the opportunity to see them up here and answer those questions. So we actually have already had some coming in. We'll ask our speakers to comment on these. The first: are there any potential issues with posting case images de-identified of patients without consent? And Amr, you went over some of those things, but maybe our other speakers could also comment on the issues that you see happening here, maybe even just beyond the disciplinary action that can occur from your institutions.
Maybe I'll give it a go. Is this on?
Should be.
So, I think Twitter is a wonderful platform to share interesting cases, and I don't necessarily think that it's, I think there's a careful balance that you have to strike between sharing images and patient-protected information. So clearly what Dr. Jory discussed makes sense, scrubbing all information from images that are being shared. I think there's some other rules of thumb that I try to use when sharing images is when a patient's actively receiving treatment or still hospitalized. I think those are not the times to share images. Anything that's truly unique, I think you have to have a reasonable delay of sometimes months before you should share those types of images online, as it can be linked back to people, especially when it comes to things like infectious diseases or very rare presentations of certain diseases. I think institutions all have policies. I think it would be very interesting and counterproductive if your institution had a policy for getting consent for sharing images on Twitter. I know when we publish cases in journals that you have to obtain consent for that a lot of times. But for sharing at conferences or for putting on Twitter, that's a little bit more of a gray area. But I think if we went down that route, or if institutions went down that route, then it becomes counterproductive and perhaps de-incentivizes people to share the wonderful content that we see all the time in our practices.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. And your institution may have policies, and you don't want to assume what those policies are. You want to go through them. When I went through the policy at my institution, I was a little surprised to find that specifically when they talk about social media and they write that there should be no information, even if the patient has provided or agreed to it, you should not do it. And they've just put a blanket ban on that. And so, my institution, the School of Medicine and the health system, they follow me on Twitter. So I'm not going to be posting stuff that violates the institutional policy. So you've got to be a little careful when you do that. The second thing is that even if you don't post patient information, the stuff that you say that can link back to a uniqueness, like Akhil just said, can be a problem. One of our surgeons got into real deep trouble when they posted about being awake or having done a particular case that was transferred from a hospital on a particular kind of day, and I won't go into details, but it just spoke to the fact that oh yeah, there was that case done on that holiday, which was Memorial Day or July 4th or something like that. And so the institution said, you're treading on thin water right now. Although this is not directly identifiable, it could be if someone took exception to it. It's not that hard to get information, right? So you have to be a little careful as to how you post stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's a gray area because when you look at Elsevier's policy for images and journals, they say if it's anonymized, you do not need consent. And so now if you're saying that you're submitting an article or an image to a journal, it's going to get on social media anyway. So why can't you post something similar that's anonymized on social media? But the difference with journals is that it does go through a vetting process and peer review. So there's that step. So it is a bit of a gray area that I think people are trying to handle. I think even ASE doesn't have a social media policy yet, and that's something we've talked about in terms of how to create one. That we might be doing in the next little while. Certainly, we want to be interactive and engage sharing. That would be the underlying principle, but how do we also protect patients?
Great answer. So another very important question: how can you tell the difference between official Twitter and Facebook and non-official?
Fake.
Or fake news?
It's a great question. For societies, a lot of times they'll link back in their accounts to their official society website. For individuals, I guess people could theoretically have fake names or names of people that are famous and claim them as their own. What we're starting to see more frequently is there's a checkbox or a Twitter symbol next to people who are prominent, and those are vetted by Twitter itself. You have to submit an application if you want yours to say that if I claim that I'm someone else that I'm not, and I try to ask Twitter to claim this as an official Twitter handle, they'll reject it because you have to show proof of it. But that's a great question. Twitter is not peer-reviewed, as Dr. Jory mentioned. Things that go out there are subject to being inaccurate and incorrect, including fake news. And so it's something that you have to be wary of to a certain extent.
So we have one last quick question. Actually, there are several more questions, but we're just not going to have time to get to them. But this is kind of a very intriguing one. What is the caret symbol on your slides, Dr. Swaminathan?
That caret came from a group on Twitter that was formed of meat-eating loving people, or meat-loving people, but a group of people, just about 7 or 8 of us, who got together at the ACC, and it was a group that just called itself the Caret Squad. It was a hashtag that was born out of a funny discussion, and so we decided, that group, that whenever we give the talk, we'll put it's a competition as to how many people would have most carrots on their slides. So I put that up, hoping that no one would see, but then someone asked that question. But it actually is a small group of cardiovascular enthusiasts, I would say, on Twitter.
So along that line, I would encourage you all to come this afternoon to the Tweet Up, which will be held during the President's reception, starting at 4:30. And indeed, that is kind of like an extension of the Caret Squad concept, in that people that perhaps never tweeted before or that were just interested got together, and then this is, I don't know how many friends I have and colleagues that I have met through Twitter alone that I've never known before. And there's several that are live tweeting this session right now, who have gone from like 0 to 105,000 speed in their adoption of Twitter and the opportunity to share, inspire, and educate. So thank you all for coming this morning. I want to thank our speakers and my co-chair. I think it's been a very invigorating session, even though it was pretty early in the morning. And I hope that, just like the advantage that we have with social media, you go out and replicate and spread the information to be able to be shared and grow our love of ECHO and all that we can do with it. Thank you very much. Have a great day.